Wholesale power markets make Uber surge pricing look like a joke. All that and more on this Energy and Materials edition of Industry Focus. Greetings, fools. Sean O'Reilly here in Alexandria, Virginia. It is April 7th, 2016, and we are here with Tyler Crow and Taylor Muckerman. What is up, guys?
Hello, hello, hello.
What's up?
So before we dive in here, I do believe it's National Beer Day.
Some might say.
Chris Hill told us, obviously the host of Market Foolery, and
He's on top of it. He's a whiskey drinker, but he knows
sent
it's
out
beer day.
the message to all the
Yeah.
podcasts. He's like, you guys got to mention this and everything. So I think I know what Chris is doing later. But anyway,
All
we
right,
love
let's
you,
go.
Chris.
Let's do really quick. Mount Rushmore of beers for you guys.
Oh man,
Mount Rushmore.
So I need
beers.
4. Now, does that imply that we need beers that were the founding fathers
Nope,
of
just
the?
your 4 favorite beers. 4 favorite beers.
Okay, really good go-to is Sam Adams Boston Lager.
Oh, look at that pitching.
Yeah.
It's just a
Boston
real
Beer Company.
listen,
Homer.
It's a really
Homer.
good go-to. It's like my Budweiser. You know what I
Okay.
mean? Like that's what I'm gonna say. So that's my George Washington.
Okay.
Does that make sense? My Thomas Jefferson is actually a beer whose recipe came from Thomas Jefferson's Monticello, and it's made by Yards Brewing Company up in I think they're in Baltimore. Correct me,
Yep.
or Philadelphia. I'm sorry, Philadelphia. And it's Thomas Jefferson's Tavern Ale, and it's so good. The premium beer, I think they charge like at Whole Foods $15 for this stupid beer, but Eric Bleeker and I, fellow fool, love this. It's a West Coast IPA from what's that California brewery? I'm really butchering this.
There's a lot of them. Sierra
Yeah,
Nevada,
no.
Stone, Rogue.
Man, he can't even come up with
Yeah.
4 favorite beers. He can't even
I know
name
it's the
it.
West Coast style IPA, and I'm picturing the bottle and everything. Anyway, to be fair, you did, anyway. And the last one is actually the Stone Best Buy IPA.
All
That's a
right.
good time too.
Okay.
They just brought that out too. I just saw it at the store the other day, and they didn't have it in the winter for whatever reason.
Nice.
So, all right, who's going next?
Tyler.
I'll go. All right. It's a beer out of Montreal called Fin du Monde, made by Unibrew. Amazing Belgian style triple. Can't get enough of it.
Does it taste like Stella or anything?
No,
Like,
no. Belgian triple style. So very
dark and
no, not dark. Very fruity. Very
Okay.
nutty. Kind of a little funky. I really like
Kind
those
of a little
off-
funky.
kind of a
I
little
like
funky.
those really out there.
You
kind of
heard it here,
beers.
folks. Tyler Crow is a little funky.
I like that kind of stuff. And then there's actually I got to kind of shout out to my hometown. There's a little microbrew in hometown, a Littleton, New Hampshire, called Schilling, and they make some great stuff. I mean, I could drink anything on their slate
All
and think
the
that it's
things.
amazing.
All
so,
the things, yeah.
Well, since there's like 3 or 4 of them that I really enjoy, we'll just say those guys encapsulate the other 3.
Jeez, cool.
All right. So we don't have to compare them to the presidents, right? We're just
No,
So-
although
Just the top
I
4.
did do that, and I like to think I get bonus points.
Okay.
But anyway,
I like Goose Island Sophie. It's kind of a triple saison style beer. I'm a fan of really anything from Ommegang. I like their large formats. I've got my Untapped app open here. Hop Slam. If you really want to, get that seasonal beer that disappears at the fraction of a second the moment it's released, and you only want to drink 1 or 2 beers, that's my go-to. And then I like for sipping my all-day IPA from Founders.
oh yeah, I lived in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Is that 4?
Yeah.
Okay.
I gotta say though, just as a aside, we are living in peak beer. Like we are living in
I
the
don't know, it
greatest,
keeps
in
growing.
the greatest time for beer. Could you imagine?
This is the renaissance of
It
beer.
is like
Da
imagine
Vinci's
30
here. It's
years
awesome.
ago when all you'd have is your choice
Butter
between
Coors.
Budweiser, Miller Coors, something
Hanging
like
out
that.
with the guys, have your silver
Today
bullet.
we're talking about 7,000 different beers. We have apps to track them. I
Crazy.
can't think of a time if you enjoy beer, there's not a better time to be alive than today.
When Trump gets put on Mount Rushmore, that's my Pilsner Urquell. That's
That is
my
right, ladies
that's
and
my
gentlemen,
other
you went
go-to.
there.
That's my other go-to sipper. The green bottle from the Czech Republic.
I did. I had it on the tip of my tongue. I did look up the brewery that makes the West Coast IPA. It's Green Flash out of San
Okay.
Diego.
Oh, yeah,
That is
okay.
a
Green
really
Flash is good beer.
special beer.
Yeah,
Anyway.
okay.
So we actually need to talk about energy and materials, guys.
No, can we just go for beer
We
for 20
could.
minutes?
We could. Like, maybe we should, I don't know, get online and see. Anyway, okay. First up that I think you sent me this story earlier. I don't know why I didn't know about this, but apparently at certain times, I think it happened like in California 12 times in a year or two ago or whatever, but negative rates for power in wholesale power markets in certain states like California, Texas. It's happening a little bit in the Northeast. And this, I was interested to read that it's basically a way to incentivize coal and nuclear plants to shut down. Taylor, can you add some color here? Like, are you, I couldn't, are you nervous if you own a nuclear plant at this point? Like, that's negative rates.
I think nuclear
In order
is
to tell you to
probably
shut
like,
your damn,
yeah.
you know, pardon my French.
I think my degree of nervousness would go coal, nuclear, natural gas.
Right.
Because coal is already on the decline. Coal companies are going bankrupt in the U.S.
That article,
seemingly every
yeah.
month. Europe is severely waning on coal production, and they were like the founders of coal power. You still have India and countries that are developing using coal, but slowing growth there. China's starting to seem like it's peaking on coal power production. So that would be the most nervous I would be.
Actually flatlined last
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. They're a little tired of the pollution, amongst other things.
Yeah, when you can't see 5 feet in front of your face, I think it's time for a wake-up call.
All the stories, I went to Beijing like 5 years ago. It is true, all of it.
Well,
It's
you
true.
have like reports
Like,
of Zuckerberg going on the smog run when he was in China, like to talk about climate change, and obviously Facebook getting into China. But
Did he actually go on a jog in Beijing?
yeah,
What did
with
he
some
do?
of the leaders from
Oh my gosh.
China, and they called it the smog run because pollution was so bad. But I mean, you had to expect this to happen sooner or later because sun and wind are, sun is kind of predictable. The clouds obviously obstruct it a little bit, but wind is less predictable. So you get peak times of both at the same time, and you can't shut down a nuclear plant willy-nilly.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think it's time to start getting nervous, at least in states that have seen the most growth from both. I think if it's just solar or if it's just wind, you probably have a few years before you need to get worried. But
At what point do nuclear plants and natural gas, plants start complaining to the government? Because granted, the
they've
cost
been
of
complaining.
solar,
They've been complaining.
Granted, the cost of solar's gone down. I think we read that it was like 1/150th of the cost for solar in the 1970s.
Yep.
You guys remember that James Bond film? I think it was The Man with the Golden Gun.
Oh, yeah,
and
I
was
remember
like
that.
The,
It was
the
a major
Solex or the
threat,
little
yeah.
thing or whatever, and all this. Anyway, 40 years later, we finally got our solar power, like James Bond was.
The happening, yeah.
Yeah, but one of the reasons wind has been so big is because of these tax credits that have been going on, and Buffett talks about them as part of his rationale for doing all the investments that he's done in solar.
Well, it's
So-
funny, like you see the tax credits get extended
Right.
into perpetuity just so we could export oil, but how long is that oil exportation really going to be a big deal? We're still importing a ton. We haven't really exported. I mean, we've exported a fraction.
We just started.
Yeah, but
a
like,
little bit.
I think that in the long run, obviously those credits are going to be a much bigger deal to fossil fuels than oil exports are going to be.
Right. What have you heard? Like, are natural gas companies and obviously coal companies are
Well, I think natural
Kind of
gas you can flip the switch on and off a little
but
easier.
if you're nuclear, at what point do you like, what the heck, federal government?
Yeah,
like I don't know.
I think long term you're probably up a creek. Unless you can figure out a way to
Actually,
turn it off and on. I don't know.
And one of the things that makes it's not just like there isn't a single nuclear company. So
Yeah.
most of the utilities have some sort of diversified generation because you have your base load, which is your nuclear power.
Like Exelon, I think, is a great example.
Yeah.
They're starting to grow renewable, but they are the largest nuclear power provider in the country.
Right. So you have that base load power, and then you go into your more variable power sources like your natural gas and your solar and wind, so that when solar and wind are getting a lot of power from that, you've got that little bit of base load power from nuclear to support, and then on the peak times, which is basically when you start to get waning production from solar and wind, during certain times of the day, then you can ramp back up with natural gas. So having that diversified kind of generation portfolio can help offset having the issue of just being a pure nuclear player or something like that.
So utilities clearly need to just get in on the game in order to survive and make sure they're
most definitely.
So I went to the Pittsburgh Pirates Cardinals opening day on Sunday, and we were obviously in coal country driving through Pittsburgh.
Oh, gosh.
And there was a huge billboard. It was like, "Wind stops, sun's set. Coal is forever." And I was like, "Oh God, please tell me that billboard is a decade old."
Oh, gee. I can't believe somebody's
still
writing
trying.
the checks for that.
They're still
because
trying.
Who's
Yeah.
writing the check for
Coal
that billboard?
companies, coal
Yeah,
producers.
But they're
and-
bankrupt. Like, what's going on here?
Well, I don't think billboards are the highest priced advertising model
Right.
anymore, so it's probably the lowest hanging fruit. To get
Oh,
their
it's like
word out.
a dying model and a dying model teaming up.
One would
and-
imagine,
oh,
yeah.
This is funny. Yeah.
It wasn't even one of those flashy billboards that changes 3 different times. It was just the paper
It was
painted
just straight up billboard. Yeah.
And this actually kind of bringing it back to yesterday's Market Foolery show that you had David Kretzmann on. They were talking about the bankruptcy of SunEdison, and I find the conversation between this and that very interesting in the sense of, like, we're talking about basically the astronomical growth of solar and wind to the point that it's basically
competitive,
It's
to say
throwing
it, yeah.
and it's also throwing the electricity market on its head. But at the same time, you have these upstart energy companies rising and falling, and
Yeah, the
it's-
market hasn't caught on to the success yet.
Yeah.
from an investor's standpoint, there's that kind of weird treading or weird point where is the company that you want to invest in that's really going to grow? And that's where I think it's so difficult because, and this is going to be a weird analogy, but I feel like investing in solar, renewables, winds, things like that, it's kind of like the Royal Rumble in wrestling. I don't know if you guys know the Royal Rumble, but
Yokozuna was always my favorite.
Oh my
one
God.
guy comes
Taking us
in-
back to
Yeah.
our preteen years.
One guy comes in every minute or so, and it changes, completely disrupts what's actually going on. And typically, the
and
person
then somebody
that
gets hit by a
starts-
chair.
Yeah, somebody gets knocked out with a chair, somebody gets thrown over the rope, and typically the person that started in the fight isn't the last one in. And I feel like with the solar the solar market, the renewable market, you do need to tread a little carefully in the sense of don't put all your eggs in one basket, like this is going to be the company, because it's such a fast-moving industry that you don't know. There's so many things that could change in any given moment. We saw it with natural gas and the shale revolution. All these companies thought they could make a ton of money on this, and then boom, collapse. So
They did for a few years to their.
Well, they made money and then they lost it all. So, you can't just say this is going to be the company. You kind of need to hedge your bets a little bit because there is an opportunity there, but don't think that one company is going to make it
When
all
when you started talking about your point, the first thing that entered my mind was that age-old Warren
Wrestling?
Buffettism. Yeah, no. Boom, hits him with a chair. But
age-old
it's
wisdom, yeah.
Yeah, but it's Buffett avoids technology because technological advances do not necessarily mean you're going to make money. Sorry, but I mean, heck, Morgan Housel had that article a year ago, and the number one stock of the last 100 years in America was Altria.
Altria, making cigarettes.
Demand's been dropping for cigarettes for 40, 50 years.
US.
Taxes and lawsuits from the government, all this stuff, and it's still beat everybody. So, yeah. Tread carefully, folks. Actually, on that note, I did want to mention that we just learned apparently that, and it seemed kind of unfair, but I think, Mr. Crow, you sent this article to me earlier. It was over in Bloomberg. Wind and solar are crushing fossil fuels, and it talks about how expenditures in, just investing in wind and solar beat out fossil fuels by like 2 or 3x or something like that last year. I thought-
Globally.
We
Globally.
went over that last week when we had your energy quiz that you kind of failed.
Well, I kind of
that.
failed on purpose along
missed
with the
that.
audience. It was a good time. But it seemed unfair. It seemed unfair when I read it because obviously CapEx in oil and gas have been cut massively
Yeah, it's
to
like
like
it's a cherry-picked
60-year lows.
statistic
I was
right now,
like,
yeah.
that's not quite fair.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah, and that's another kind of just a general point for investors is stories can be very cherry-picked sometimes. And so kind of before reading it and having a knee-jerk reaction, kind of step back and take a look at it. When it says something like, yeah, it's outpacing, oil's growth, it's like, well, yeah, but there is very little correlation between oil and
Right.
solar. Oil is a transportation fuel and used for plastics. Solar is mostly an electricity generation, and there's very little overlap between the two unless you want to talk about electric vehicles, which is what, 0.01% of overall
Right.
transportation market right now. It's going to grow, but it's not there yet.
Not
So, don't when you see that, don't immediately go, oh man, oil's done because
Right.
of solar. It's going to take time.
Not only that, but oil and gas is already a multi-trillion-dollar industry. You're not
Right.
gonna,
Yeah.
I
I think it's going to be at least a decade before this show is dominated by renewable energy talk.
right. So
We'll still be talking about oil for a little while longer on this show.
we need to make plastics. You guys, it's like
Well, we need oil to make plastic.
Yeah, exactly.
Until
Well, no,
the
that was
sun
my
can
point.
make
Yeah.
plastic.
that'll be good. Yeah,
That's it.
we need to make our Apple cars that are electric out of
That's
plastic.
right.
So before we head out of here, we would be remiss if we didn't mention the Baker Hughes.
We've
And
got a lot of
Halliburton.
lawsuits going on right now.
Yeah,
I
what's
think
going on?
lawsuits are all
very,
over the place
very
in the energy
litigious
space.
sector lately.
Yeah.
To the
Well, I mean,
surprise of
there's been maybe too many mergers and acquisitions
Perhaps.
proposed.
just a few, but to the surprise of nobody at this table, the Justice Department filed a lawsuit for antitrust concerns of the proposed merger between Baker Hughes and Halliburton. Obviously, nobody here was surprised. Any things that surprised you from the announcement?
Not a whole lot. I didn't think it would get so far that the Justice Department would actually sue. I thought that
Did make them sell stuff.
I thought that what was going to end up happening was, and this was my kind of theory why I wasn't totally on board with the idea, is I thought that what was going to end up happening is to make the merger happen, they would have to strip out so many parts to, meet Department of Justice needs that it wouldn't have been a whole lot bigger than,
Right.
as a two separate entities in the first place. But it seems like Halliburton and Baker Hughes still keep
They wanna fight it.
kind of pushing on.
They're gonna fight it.
I do want to
Halliburton
get. I want to
is
get Taylor
fighting it
more.
because-
They don't want to write a $3.5
Well,
billion
yeah,
dollar
and because
check.
Baker Hughes can't say "screw it, we're done."
Right.
Only Halliburton can do that until the end of this month. Then Baker Hughes can be like,
Listen,
"This isn't
guys,
worth it. We're done. Give us our money."
That seems likely to happen now,
Well,
doesn't
maybe.
it?
I don't know.
If it
made
wouldn't
a
be
lot
the
of
most
changes.
absurd thing for
Yeah.
Baker Hughes to step away and say, "We're done. Give us our $3.5 billion. We'll take either all the debt off, or we can maybe go acquire in a smaller oil services
Yeah,
company."
if oil prices were sky high, they'd be like,
peace
"Please
out."
buy us." But because they can go out and maybe buy some competitors,
Well, there were some analysts, though, that said, and I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on this in the Wall Street Journal article that I read about this. Some analysts said that Baker Hughes might struggle on its own if this doesn't go through. Is there any truth to that?
I mean, they were kind of compared to Halliburton and Schlumberger. They were already struggling,
Right.
And they've made a lot of changes, probably internally, to help this deal go through. And traditionally, I guess the acquirer does better after a failed
Yeah.
merger or acquisition. But these two compete head to head, so
Yeah.
just handing your direct competitor $3.5 billion.
On that note, there's actually a quote that I really wanted to read. Bill Baer, it's Baer, I assume it's Baer. The Justice Department's antitrust chief pulled no punches in his criticisms of the merger, and he said, "I couldn't believe this. I have seen a lot of problematic mergers in my time, but I have never seen one that poses so many antitrust problems in so many markets." That's kind of a scathing indictment right there. I mean, what was it? There were like 23 markets that they were worried about or something?
Yeah, they are the number 2 and the number 3 in the oil services industry, and when you bring those two together, you could say Weatherford International and Superior Energy Services are competitors.
Who?
Exactly. Exactly. So when you bring those two together, or Baker Hughes and Halliburton together, you have a pretty much a duopoly in the sector, and that poses a little bit more problems. At least with that third player, you get a little bit more pricing competition that makes it a little bit more favorable to the entire industry, where somebody isn't going to get gouged. So
I mean, I wonder, though, Schlumberger and Cameron, that was passed in like a day, and
This has
they're
been a
now
year and a
they're-
half
Now they're
we've been
an
talking.
offshore monster. On top of Schlumberger already being by far the biggest company in equipment and services in the oil field. So when that passed, I was thinking, okay, this has a much better chance. But now it's like, what the hell?
Yeah. Unbelievable.
I mean,
Cool.
Halliburton has $10 billion in cash, so losing a third of it wouldn't be the best thing in the world. But they wouldn't necessarily put him in the,
Right. They
in
would
the
not have
bankruptcy.
agreed to it if
Yeah.
they didn't think Grum.
they're not heading for the bread line
No,
afterwards.
absolutely not. It would be tough to see a competitor. I'd liken it to like T-Mobile, who received billions twice from Sprint over failed takeovers, and now look at them. They're like the fastest growing
They're doing well.
mobile company in
They
the
made
world.
good use of that money.
Absolutely. They didn't decide to give a special dividend. They
What's
didn't
Baker
dec-
Hughes' market cap? Does anybody know
Not off the
offhand?
top of my head.
Not off the
no.
top of my head.
I hate to do that to you guys.
Actually, I have. That's what computers are for.
It's fine.
So its market cap currently
$20.39
there we
billion.
go.
So this is
Boom.
a significant chunk of change for them.
Absolutely.
That's like 15-16% of their worth.
Right.
I mean,
and
they only have 2.3 billion of cash on the books. So
Are you interested in buying Baker Hughes now?
not before this happens. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
that's
just
fun.
gonna stick to my guns with Halliburton and ride this out because regardless if this deal doesn't go through, the stock is probably worth more than it is if
Right.
oil rebounds. So
Right.
I'm not
And-
worried as a long-term shareholder.
And going back to the long-term thesis on a lot of this, what was it, late 2014 when this deal was announced? And I'll admit, I think some of us were as guilty of getting caught up in it. But there's so much, attention that's given to, do you buy with the merger or do you sell with the merger? And there's so much talk when it comes to these sort of things of buy, sell, trade. It's very speculative. I mean, we've been talking about this story for a year and a half almost now, and it looks like it's going the other way. When if there were people out there that actually bought based on the acquisition and making them a powerhouse, if that is your thesis for making this investment, you might want to wait until the ink is dry and you can see some operational performance on an acquisition before you really start to get into it. Don't automatically dive in on an announcement. Actually be a patient investor and see a well-performing company actually, hit its targets before you really want to dive in on something like this.
Wise words. All right. Well, thanks for your thoughts, guys.
Yeah, is that it?
Hey,
Let's go.
I believe so.
Let's go get a 6-pack over at Whole Foods.
I think, National Beer Day, I mean, it's afternoon now. We can,
Yeah.
we
Well,
can
not only
start.
that, but it's always noon somewhere. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
I had
All
a
right.
six-pack under my desk for like a year. Maybe
Just for this day.
Hey, man.
Actually,
exactly.
on the national beer thing, this is like a family heirloom. I don't know if you guys will know this but Jimmy Carter was the one who kind of signed the laws that allowed microbrewing to happen in the United States and kind of changed the landscape for it. And his brother, Billy, brewed his own beer.
Billy
back in the
Carter.
And I have my grandfather has a
Boogity
6-pack
boogity.
of Billy beer at his house.
Wow.
Wow. What's the
I
alcohol
am-
content?
What's
on
the
this thing?
sediment
I want to
layer-
see this
layer?
beer.
I mean,
look
it's in
like
a
in the
can.
bottom
You
of-
can't
oh,
tell,
so you
but
can't
I
see.
wouldn't touch that
I'm going to
stuff with a 10-foot
speculate
pole.
it would be
It's
terrible.
probably gone bad by now.
That would be, yeah, cool. All right. Well, that is it for us, fools. Thanks for listening. If you are looking to reach out with a question or comment, we'd love to hear from you. Just email us at industryfocus@fool.com. Once again, that is industryfocus@fool.com. And as always, people in this program may have interest in the stocks that they talk about, and the Motley Fool may have formal recommendations for or against those stocks, so don't buy or sell anything based solely on what you hear on this program. Fool on, everybody.